I do. Give me just a second and I'll get there. Before I do that, let me make sure, this is also in your book, but you should have two pieces of information, well, one piece of information, and then some notes that Deborah will hand out if you haven't already. This is our primary source that we're going to work from by Apologetics Press. In the very first page, you'll find under acknowledgement the link to that, to Apologetics Press, and then you will also find the book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. I would suggest, and especially if you aren't here but you're watching this on YouTube, that two things. First of all, in Apologetics Press, you can go to apologeticspress.com, and if you click on Home Study Courses, you can download everything we're doing here for free. Now, what we did was purchase these, the ones that you've got, but you can download pretty much the same thing for free. I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist can be purchased in a number of places, but Christian Book Distributors it will probably be 20%, at least 10% lower than every place else. And I looked today, it's $15 or something like that. That's this guy.
Price went up, I paid 11 for mine.
Did you?
Joking.
Well, then you owe me $4. Yes.
Well, mine is 10 years old or 8 years old.
Wow.
Something like that.
So Deb, you asked the question, what page?
Yeah, where do you want?
So we're going to start in lesson number 2, and we're going to be on the first page. We're just going to recap a couple of things there, and then we'll move on. We talked a little bit last week about the cosmological argument, and that was the whole issue of cause and effect. Do you remember that? So the cosmological argument is basically this. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe, all space, time, and matter, began to exist, the Big Bang. Therefore, the universe has a cause. A cause is necessarily spaceless, timeless, or this cause is necessarily spaceless, timeless, immaterial, and powerful, plausibly personal, and known conceptually as God. Now, the law of causality in the cosmological, and it's basically very simple. It's just cause and effect, right? For every effect, there has to have been a cause. Something caused that. So here is the law of causality. And I want you to focus on a couple of things. Material effects without adequate cause do not exist. A material effect is anything that's material. Causes can never occur after the effect, and the effect can never be greater than the cause. In other words, the cause must be adequate. This is the most universal and most certain of all natural laws. Called the law of causality, but probably the simplest way to think of it is just the law of cause and effect. Now, the universe exists and is real. Every rational person, including atheists and agnostics, must admit this point. So the question arises, how did the universe get here? If a thing cannot create itself, then it's said to be a contingent thing because it's dependent on something else, something outside of itself, to explain its existence. The universe, therefore, is a contingent entity since it cannot cause or explain its own existence. If the universe did not create itself, it must have a cause. Correct? That's the law of causality. The universe existed, the universe exists, it's material, that means it had a cause. Now, as I said, the important pieces are material effects without adequate cause do not exist. Causes can never occur after the effects, and the effect is greater than the cause. Therefore, it must be adequate. So what caused the universe? Dale?
I was just thinking, at times, the effect does seem greater than the cause. As an example, the explosion of the atomic bomb over Hiroshima, that was the cause. The effect was such total devastation, which, and due to my lack of understanding, appears greater than the cause, because I don't understand the energy that was in the atoms that were split. But, so the cause may look bigger than the effect, or the effect may look bigger than the cause, but it can't be, because anything that happens loses energy, so.
That's right. That's a good point, though, is when you look at the effects of Hiroshima, you have to think, wow, how could the cause possibly be bigger, right? But when we get, well, we're going to get to a couple of other pieces here that's going to help explain that, I think. So let's go back to the question is of, if the universe is here, that means what? It had a cause, right? Well, what are the possibilities for how it was caused? There's three. The universe is eternal, it's always existed. Well, unfortunately, not unfortunately, that's been disproven, hasn't it? Einstein found that out last week when we talked about it. The universe had a beginning. The universe is material, it had a beginning, therefore it had a cause. But that's one possibility, the universe is eternal, it's always existed. The second is, the universe is not eternal, rather, it created itself out of nothing.
How can it do that? That's the question.
Or the third, the universe is not eternal, it did not create itself out of nothing, but instead was created by something or someone outside of and superior to the universe. Dale?
Keep interrupting, but how did Carl Sagan argue with Einstein when he said cosmos always is, or always was, always will be, or whatever he said? How did he, what argument did he use against Einstein?
I have no idea. But Einstein is the one who finally said, he was the one who's confronted with his own theory and said there is a cause. So I have no idea. Well, I do. And you'll find this quite common in, we're going to see some of them here, in schools of atheism, which is, I refuse to accept anything else. Presuppositions. Jerry?
A little bit of trivia back to Dale's thing about Hiroshima. The second atomic bomb that was dropped on Japan or Nagasaki, 80% of the Christians in Japan lived in Nagasaki.
Wow.
The Japanese kept all the Christians in Nagasaki for a couple of reasons. One, the first missionaries that went to Japan went to Nagasaki, and the Japanese kept them all there so they could control them. So the bomb killed a bunch of Christians that morning.
So that means that the gates of heaven were thrown wide open, at least for that group. All right, so let's look at these three possibilities. First, the universe is eternal. So the most comfortable position for a person who does not believe in God is the idea that the universe always has been. And that was the supposition that Einstein and others had made, that the universe was eternal. If the universe was eternal, then what did that mean? There was nothing that caused it to come into existence, right? So that would have been the simplest. However, modern science recognized that the universe is not eternal. It had a beginning, and it will have an end. So among the most important and well-established laws of science are the laws of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics, often called the law of conservation of energy and or matter, states that neither matter nor energy can be created or destroyed. The second law of thermodynamics, often called the law of increasing entropy, states that everything is running down or wearing out. Energy is becoming less and less available for use. Entropy, by the way, I'm on page 2, is a measure of randomness, disorderliness, and unstructuredness. Let me give you a slide that I think does a pretty good job of explaining this. Now, you'll find a number of other slides on the internet that are minus the finger, minus the hand. Now, you see the bell shape? That's going to demonstrate for us the first law of thermodynamics. The amount of energy there is in the universe is finite. It's all contained in that bell shape. The second law of thermodynamics is going to be demonstrated. You see where the finger hits and it's bright yellow and then it turns green and then it kind of continues to kind of expand? That's going to be the second law of thermodynamics, and it's also going to explain entropy. You notice how we get further out, it becomes less and less organized. It becomes less organized from what it was at the beginning of time. So this is, in a very simplistic manner, all three are the two laws and what entropy is. The first law of thermodynamics is a finite amount of energy. Second law of thermodynamics is energy is being used, and entropy is, it's also not only being used, but it's going from organization to randomness. Now, Dale?
Entropy actually contradicts evolution.
It does, exactly.
And so how can a scientist be a scientist and believe one and not the other, and if he believes the other, he can't believe the one?
Well, and that's exactly, it's a very good point. If entropy is a law, which it is, entropy says you're becoming less and less and less. What does atheism say on that, or what does evolution say on the other side? You're becoming more and more and more. Evolution would be almost the exact opposite of what we see here. Now, let me give you a couple of examples of this. From Geisler's book. Let's do the first law of thermodynamics first. As I said, states the total amount of energy in the universe is constant. That's our bell. In other words, the universe has only a finite amount of energy, such as your car has only a finite amount of gas. Now, if your car has only a finite amount of gas, the first law, and whenever it's running, it continually consumes gas, the second law, would your car be running right now if you had started it up indefinitely long ago? No, right? I got a little anecdote I'm going to tell you here in just a minute. No, of course not. It would be out of gas by now. In the same way, the universe would be out of energy by now if it had been running for all eternity. But here we are. The lights are on, so the universe must have begun sometime in the finite past. That is, the universe is not eternal. It had a beginning. Let me give you one other example. A flashlight is another way to think about the universe. If you leave a flashlight on overnight, what's the intensity of the light in the morning? It's dim, right? So that demonstrates for us the first and second law of thermodynamics. I want to hit one more item on thermodynamics. The second law is also known as the law of entropy, which Dale just talked about. It's a fancy way of saying that nature tends to bring things into disorder. Let me give you proof of going from order to disorder. The next time my 3, 5, and 7-year-old grandsons are here, I will bring them to your house, and you will instantly see your house will experience entropy. It will go from order to disorder in a very short period of time. So it brings things to disorder. That is, with time, things naturally fall apart. Your car falls apart, your house falls apart, your body falls apart. In fact, the second law is reason that many of us, this is Geisler, the second law is the reason that many of us get dresser disease. When we get older, our chests fall into our drawers. But if the universe is becoming less ordered, then where did the original order come from? Astronomer Robert Jastrow likens the universe to a wound-up clock. If a wind-up clock is running down, then someone must have wound it up. Now, what is the other important piece of atheism in terms of being able to explain how it happens? Very, very, very long periods of time, right? In fact, they'll say millions and millions and millions of years. The reason for that is that that time is necessary to be able to explain how very tiny and subtle incremental changes happen within organisms over a very long period of time. That's why it's important for atheism to recognize an eternal universe. Unfortunately, for the atheist, we just proved that that's not true. All right. As I said, the second law points to a beginning when for the first time the universe was in a state where all energy was available for use, and two, an end in the future where no more energy will be available, referred to by scientists as heat death. What happens if all the energy, if this is time, what happens if all the energy in our bell eventually gets to the point that there's nothing left? Cease, right? Ceases to exist. So the universe is not eternal. Eternal entities do not have a beginning or an ending, and they do not run down. So our first argument is the universe can't be eternal. So here's our second argument. Did the universe create itself out of nothing? Now, in the past, it would have been practically impossible to find any reputable scientist who'd be willing to suggest that the universe simply made itself. Every scientist, as well as every other schoolboy, understood the fact no material thing can create itself. The universe is created. It is not the creator, correct? Is the creator also the creation?
No.
You are either the creator or you are the created, right? So, until fairly recently, it seemed there could be no disagreement on the point. However, by the way, on page 3, however, so strong is the evidence that the universe had a beginning and thus a cause superior to itself that some unbelieving scientists have suggested that the universe literally created itself from nothing. So naturally, such a proposal would have seemed absurd because the basic principles of physics establish that the creation of something out of nothing is impossible. Robert Jastrow, who I mentioned just a minute ago, let me tell you what he says. Let me tell you who he is first. Robert Jastrow is an astronomer. In addition to serving as the director of the Mount Wilson, Jastrow is founder of NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies. Obviously, his credentials as a scientist are impeccable. That's why his book, God and the Astronomers, made such an impression on those investigating the implications of the Big Bang, namely those asking the question, does the Big Bang point to God? Here's what Jastrow says. The creation of matter out of nothing would violate a cherished concept in science, the principle of the conservation of matter and energy, which is the first law of thermodynamics, which states that matter and energy can be neither created nor destroyed. Matter can be converted into energy and vice versa, but the total amount of all matter and energy in the universe must remain unchanged forever. It is difficult to accept a theory that violates such a firmly established scientific fact. Now, let me give you one more quote from Jastrow, especially since he's an agnostic. In light of Jastrow's personal agnosticism, his theistic quotations are all the more provocative. After explaining some of the Big Bang evidence we've just reviewed, Jastrow writes, now we see how the astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world. The details differ, but the essential elements in the astronomical and biblical accounts of Genesis are the same. The chain of events leading to man commenced suddenly and sharply at a definite moment in time, in a flash of light and energy. That's the Big Bang. In the beginning, God.
Sounds like he's read the Bible also, when he mentions Genesis.
Well, and the interesting part about it is, at least as of this writing, he claimed to be an agnostic. An agnostic says you cannot know whether there is or is not. So then our third possibility here. So if
He
you,
can't be an agnostic.
that's kind of what I thought.
I mean, when he says what he says, then he can't be
That's
agnostic.
what I thought.
That's kind of what I thought too. You know, I want to get his book just to see what he says, but it is kind of, how do I claim to be an agnostic and then turn around and say Genesis and the Big Bang are the same thing? I don't know.
Some people just never let the facts get in the way of what they believe.
That's exactly right. Oh, you didn't bring your book, did you?
I have it.
Do you? Not the Bible, the book. Did you? Would you mind reading the little story about the guy who said he was dead? You'll see why when he reads the story.
Back to presuppositional apologetics. There's an old story about a man with a very strange problem. He's convinced that he was dead. His doctor tried to assure him that he was not dead, and that he was in fact perfectly healthy. After all, argued the doctor, you're able to walk and talk, but the man remained convinced that he was dead. He pointed out that muscle spasms can occur after clinical death, and this could explain his ability to walk and talk. The doctor presented medical charts and tables, but the man wouldn't budge. He pointed out that the charts could be falsified, and the doctor probably wasn't reading them correctly anyway. Finally, the doctor had an idea, a way he could prove that the man was alive. The doctor asked if dead men believe. The man responded, well, no, dead men don't believe. The doctor then took a small needle and pricked the man's arm. Sure enough, a small droplet of blood emerged. See, the doctor said. The man responded, well, how about that? I guess dead men do believe.
So Jerry, it just demonstrated exactly what you said, which is, in the face of all possible evidence in the world, people will still reject what they don't want to believe. So now, we've dealt with the fact that the universe is not eternal. We've dealt with the fact that it could not and did not create itself. So, was the universe created? That's our third option. Either the universe had a beginning or it didn't. But all available evidence indicates the universe did, in fact, have a beginning. If the universe had a beginning, it either had a cause or it did not. One thing we know for sure, however, is it is correct logically and scientifically to acknowledge that the universe had a cause, because the universe is an effect, and as such, it requires an adequate cause. Cause and effect states that whenever there is a material effect, there must be an adequate cause. Now I'm on page 4, by the way. Further indicated, however, is the fact that no effect can be greater than its cause. Now, since it's obvious that the universe is not eternal, since it's also obvious the universe could not have created itself, there's only one alternative left, correct? The universe was created by something or someone that A, existed before or at the same time with it, that is some eternal uncaused first cause. We're going to come back to that point of the first cause here in just a minute because there's a problem with it. And B, it is superior to it, since the created cannot be superior to the creator. And C, is of a different nature, since the finite dependent universe of matter is unable to explain itself. So it's something different than natural, or the natural universe. In connection with this fact, is another fact should be considered. If there ever had been a time when absolutely nothing existed, then there would be nothing now. Because it always is true that nothing produces nothing. In view of this, since something exists now, it must follow logically that something has existed forever. Now, I think I'm going to get, no, actually I'm going to get pushback on this next statement I'm going to make, but I want to come back to it. If you're on page 4, about halfway down, you're going to find a paragraph that says, everything that humans know to exist can be classified as either matter or mind. There is no third alternative. Now, both Dale and Zach got their hackles
You're
up.
using mind in a different sense, though.
Okay.
It's a semantic, it's not an issue.
I don't understand how it's been used.
So tell me.
So you're using, so you were talking about mind and spirit, which are separate, but you're talking about a cause here. So you're saying that nothing can be created outside of nothing, or outside of a mind, which is true. Just like you couldn't have a computer perform a function without an input or a story write itself or anything like that. You have to have a mind behind it. So, but you're just using it in a different sense here.
So Dale, you want to make the point that you did?
Well, the point I made was that, first of all, spirit is not the same as mind. And God's spirit hovered over the face of the deep. And I'm trying to understand at the same time what he's talking about is mind. The cause behind the universe had intellect. There's no doubt about that, which we associate with mind. So I can see that point. It's just that God is spirit, and that's not the same as mind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which I agree with.
That's true, but I just think that mind is being used in a general sense there.
Well, pardon me?
Said I agree.
Yeah. And I think Dale, I'm going to read this again and listen carefully to the way I read this. Everything that humans know to exist can be classified as either matter or mind. Do humans know matter exists? Do humans know mind exists? Do humans know spirit exists?
I don't know if all do or not.
That's the point.
Well, I think instead of mind, when you say humans know matter, they know mind, you should just say humans know matter and then metaphysical categories like logic and math and concepts.
Well, what I'm trying to do here is point out that not everybody does think, and I'm going to point out again, everything that humans know, not every human believes there is a soul or a spirit. In
There's
fact,
humans that deny metaphysics completely.
and this, well, I will tell you where this comes from, because you'll understand as soon as I say who it's from. The Cambridge University Press. It's an article called Do Souls Exist? And I just have an extract of it. The soul hypothesis, the belief that souls exist and humans have them, enjoys near unanimous support in the general population. I think that's probably a true statement. Among philosophers and scientists, however, belief in the soul is far less common. The purpose of this essay is to explain why many philosophers and scientists reject the soul hypothesis and to consider what the non-existence of the soul would entail. So I believe there's a soul and a spirit. You believe there's a soul and a spirit. Probably everybody in this room believes there's a soul and a spirit. If I were an atheist, would I believe that there was a soul and a spirit? Probably not. Sorry, Zach, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, if you're a materialist or a strict determinist,
Yep.
reasoning of logic.
So is everybody following so far?
Well, the other thing that I'm not certain of though is, it's a matter of mind, so if I can get past the spirit aspect. Because light is either particle and or wave. If it's wave, it has no mass, therefore it is not matter. It is energy. But it's not mind or matter, it's energy. So in that sense, and since it does perform as a wave, and sometimes it performs like a nuclear particle.
Dale, speak up a little bit more when you,
Isn't photons moving through a wave though?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
it's your wave.
I don't know, I think.
But photons are particles.
Okay, Marilyn just gave the sign. And that's one of the things we want to be careful of, is not getting into the minutiae so deep that we miss the point. Now, I still don't want to discourage you from participating, but we do need to get to the point where we can say, okay, we're good with where we are, let's move on.
Let's go on.
Good idea. All in favor? Jerry?
One of the things that interests me is people who say they believe in science and, you know, that there's a scientific explanation for all of this beyond God. The point I make to them is we have instruments that we use to measure things and to see things. We didn't even know what an atom looked like until a few years ago. So what are we going to be able to see 50 years from now or 100 years from now? What kind of devices are we going to have that may show spirits? I don't know.
Well, you know, the perfect answer for that is probably when somebody says, the only thing I believe in is science, then I ask them, okay, how do you believe?
By faith.
Because they use that same argument though. They follow that same line of argumentation and say, well, anything we can't explain, we just don't have the technology.
Yeah.
But we're talking medically.
Well, DNA came about when? In the early 80s?
Well, in 50, early 50s.
58, I think. We're going to get to that.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up this piece with, on the bottom part of this page, there's a pretty good rational argument here that I want to walk through. Everything, number one, everything that exists is either dependent, that is, it's contingent, or it's independent, non-contingent. In other words, if you're contingent, you're dependent on something else happening. If you're independent, you're not dependent on something else happening. If the universe is not eternal, then it has to be dependent or contingent on something else happening. The universe is not eternal. We've already proved that, right? Therefore, the universe is dependent, meaning it's contingent on something. So if the universe is dependent, it must have been caused by something that is independent and greater, but the universe is dependent, contingent. Therefore, the universe was produced by some eternal, independent, non-contingent force. Is everybody following that?
Yeah, because you explained it to me earlier.
Now, I told you earlier we had a problem, and here is the problem. Try as they might, skeptics are unable, this is on page 5, to avoid the obvious implications of the law of cause and effect. However, that's not stopped them from trying, and you'll hear this all the time. And they therefore have leveled countless arguments against it. For example, one such argument insists that the idea must be false because it's inconsistent within itself. I'm going to give you an example of that here in just a minute. The argument goes something like this. The principle of cause and effect says that everything must have a cause. On this concept, it then traces all things back to the first cause, where it suddenly stops. But how may it do so and remain consistent? Why does the principle that everything needs a cause suddenly cease to be true? This is their argument. Why is it that the so-called first cause does not likewise require some kind of cause? Are you following me? In other words, the atheist is going to say, well, okay, you get back to the finger. What caused the finger? Didn't there have to be a cause to cause the finger? Do you follow me? Why does the first cause also not need an explanation or a cause? And if this first cause does not need an explanation, why then do all the other things need one? I'm giving you the argument of what an atheist would say. If you've made this whole point of cause and effect, what caused the first cause that caused the effect of the universe? Do you follow me? Is everybody tracking here? Okay. Well, the problem is it's an incorrect statement of the law. If someone were to say everything must have a cause, then the objection might be valid. But this is not what the law of causality says. It says that every material effect must have an adequate cause. Ultimately, at some point in the distant past, there must be a pure first cause that is non-material in nature. What would that be? If it's non-material in nature, it would be supernatural, right? I'm not even going to say God yet. If it's not material in nature, it has to be supernatural.
Or you might even say it must be energy.
I'm okay with that too, but I guess the point would be the argument is lost when you state it incorrectly by saying everything must have a cause. Everything that is material, every material effect must have a cause. Is the universe material?
Yes.
Yes. It had a cause. So then what's the conclusion? By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but on your handout, the picture on the front, that's my backyard. I did all these blocks. That is Stonehenge. Let me give you the conclusion. To illustrate the law, this is on page 6 if you want to outline it. To illustrate the law of cause and effect, one scientist, R.L. Weissong, referred to the following historical event. Some years ago, scientists were called to Great Britain to study orderly patterns of concentric rocks and holes. An archaeological find eventually designated as Stonehenge. As studies progressed, excuse me, it became quite apparent that these patterns had been designed specifically for the purpose of allowing a variety of astronomical predictions. Many questions, for example, how ancient peoples were able to construct an astronomical observatory, how the data resulting from their studies were used, etc., remain unsolved. But one thing we know with certainty, the cause of Stonehenge was intelligent design. Now, why would we believe that Stonehenge might have been produced by erosion of a mountain or by a catastrophic natural forces working in conjunction with meteorites to produce rock formations and concentric holes? What scientists or philosophers ever would suggest such an idea? No one in his right mind could be convinced that Stonehenge just happened by accident. Yet atheists, agnostics, and skeptics expect us to believe that this highly ordered, well-designed universe just came to be. So now what's the summary to all of this? And it's on page, they don't have a page number, it's the last page. Simply put, the central message of the cosmological argument, again, just call it cause and effect, and the law of cause and effect upon which it is based is this. Every material effect must have an adequate cause. The universe is here. Intelligent life is here. Morality is here. Love is here. What is their adequate cause? Since the effect never can come before or be greater than the cause, then it stands to reason that the cause of life must be a living, intelligent, and must be a living intelligence that itself is moral, ethical, and loving. When the Bible records in the beginning God, it makes known just such a first cause. Is everybody tracking? Did I lose anybody? Does it all make sense? Everybody said amen? Let me ask a question here. We're going to have actually two more. Is there two more? Yeah. Two more proofs of the existence of God. Two more lessons worth. The next one is called, great, here's another one you'll just love. The next one is called the teleological argument. Teleology is T-E-L-E-O-L-O-G-Y. It's the philosophical interpretation of natural phenomena as exhibiting purpose or design. And it comes from Greek and subsequently Latin teleos, meaning the end, goal, or result, and logia, meaning study of or to speak of, which, by the way, is where we get our term logos. So the next lesson we're going to do is on the existence of God by design. The first one we did was the existence of God based on the fact that something had to have created the cosmos, the cosmological argument. This is going to be that there is so much in the world to indicate that there was an intelligent designer, that we can't ignore the fact that someone or something created everything that's in the universe, and that's called the teleological argument. Now, the reason I brought that up is I hesitate to start it tonight because I think it would be a problem to get partway through it and then come back and try to make it all back up again. Does anybody have any heartburn with that? Everybody okay if we call it a night? Okay? Then let's do that, and that'll still give us some time for Dale's Dailies. Let me quit recording here.
I want to go back to the whole discussion about matter and mind.
Okay?
Would a better way of saying that, instead of using the word mind, maybe consciousness? Matter and consciousness? I mean, would that, I don't know, mind seemed very limiting.
I don't know. I don't think I guess when I read that, my thinking was some of the metaphysical things we talked about, like for instance, the mind obviously can see and sense all the material things, but can the mind also not conceive of love, hate, things that are not tactile? So I didn't have a problem with mind. Zach, did
I don't take issue with mine. I think that's pretty much synonymous, at least how I think about it.
mind and consciousness?
Yeah.
Well, what did Descartes say? I think, therefore I am. Jerry?
A little trivia, I've always been fascinated by the atomic bomb because the first one was detonated on my birthday, July 16th. I've read a lot of books about it. It was very interesting. They did not know what power that bomb was going to have. There was a 5% chance that it could have set the atmosphere on fire. And Oppenheimer was discussing with all of his scientists there at Los Alamos about it. There must have been some believers there because one of the scientists told Oppenheimer, the Bible says man cannot destroy the earth.
Interesting.
So every one of them there was not an atheist.
I suspect there were a bunch that weren't. Dale?
The concept of how big is our rod, I met a guy once who was talking about, and I think he called it a vision that he had, and he saw God reclining, and the way I pictured it, he had this ball that was on a string, like a yo-yo, and that was the universe.
Wow.
He was just playing. That's a pretty big God.
Well, it'd be even bigger if he had all 5 fingers with, I mean, all 10 fingers with universes. Anybody else? Let's call it a night from recording then. Stop recording, yes.